So if it's Saturday, I must be recording a video in my class. So what I kind of want to talk about, we're in week three, we're near the end of week three. This is Saturday, February 3rd, 2018. And what I want to look at a little bit is the Clark case. Let me say a couple of things. Well, okay. Uh, I know a lot of people comment, and some people say, "Oh, you're showing me STLCC. That doesn't help me um, at uh, at UMSL and vice versa." It's basically the same organization, slightly different menu labels. So in St. Louis Community College, you go to course content, and you'll find most of the files we're going to deal with all semester. If you go into UMSL, you're going to go to files or pages. It's kind of weird. The discussions in are not very robust. I can't edit the discussions once I've set them up. It's really bad in Canvas. And it's not something I picked. I'm not trying to throw people under the bus, but there's not much I can do there. Pages is where legal research project is also where the mock trial is. In Blackboard, we have a separate discussion board set up for a group project. It works way better. Blackboard's a lot better there. But what we deal with at UMSL is if you click on files, you can see you've got pretty much the same thing we have over here in course content. Okay, schedule of assignments. Now let me make I don't want to open this because it always reveals student name. I guess I should have had this open before. People are always confused by, well, case analysis and case presentation, those must be on the same case. No. What happens is in the schedule of assignments, you've been assigned a specific case. They're either contracts or criminal cases, and that's the case you alone will read. The case analysis is Clark versus MKT. We also do a mock trial on this, all right? So what I wanted to talk about in the Clark versus MKT is, and I don't know if I've got these loaded twice in the community college. If we go over to files in the mock trial documents, I've got one that is published to me, but it didn't work right. It didn't set up right. But here's everything at UMSL. You click in here. There's a broad outline, and that basically, there's two of them. They both, at least the first parts of them, are a little different. They're kind of interesting. I don't think I did this with St. Louis Community College, but at UMSL, they're both there. There are also mock trial documents, which is a zip folder. And that's what I'm going to talk about, but I'm going to jump over to the St. Louis Community College website and look there. There's also something else called the photos of the scene. So these two broad outline documents will give you a general description of what we're going to accomplish in the course of this. And we're doing essentially a mock lawsuit from date of filing forward on. You don't have to file the complaint. We're already presuming it's in there. But we will look at a lot of the discovery process, depositions, interrogatories, other stuff. And then it also talks about how you ask questions at trial. Depending on what happens with the initial drop date in a couple of days for this class, I just checked. I sent out an email about 24 hours ago, and it appears not to have spurred much activity. Only one student got back to me. about, hey, I noticed my attendance, tell me how I succeed, um, blah, blah, blah. But I've got a feeling we're going to lose somewhere in the neighborhood of 40 students by Monday. Um, so that's going to change things. But so you got to be a little bit flexible, kind of play it by ear. I know this impacts the Titanic and others. Will have to kind of modify these a little bit as we go. The roles I first assigned are mostly just to kind of get you rolling in the Titanic and to get you beginning to think that, wait a minute, this, a big ship like this, there's a lot of people on there. There's a lot of different stuff that could be happening. All right, so I'm going to go in here and grab this mock trial documents. I've actually got it saved out on my desktop. Um, let's see, well, maybe I don't. Looks like I don't, because it just gave me the option to open them up. You should do the same. I really recommend you save these to a zip drive or something similar. Save it to the cloud. Put everything in this case in a single folder in a variety of places so that you always have access to it. Because sometimes you don't bring your zip file, but hey, I've got it sitting out at the cloud. I sent it to myself in some emails. I can search my email. I can set up a separate folder in my email account for this class or this semester, subset this class. Make it organized so it works for you. All right, so we've got a whole bunch of documents up here. But what I really want to jump on is a couple of things in a training outline and how Clark got trained. Because if we look at the training for this incident, a trackman who in 4 years working on the railroad had never rounded up Texas steer, even though this railroad shipped them for at least 20 years prior to his injury, and probably had well over 1,000 derailments involving Texas steer. The extent of his training on May 13th of 1897 was, be careful, you might get hurt. This is one of the most absurd training things I've ever heard. It's basically telling a guy in an extremely dangerous occupation, be careful. It doesn't tell him how to do, what sort of behavior to expect from a steer, anything like that. Now, in the mock trial, we're going to jump to a different thing. And I'm probably at a later date, I'm going to report videos that talk about the majority of these, that will also talk about some of the roles we're going to play. But I'm going to put that off till next weekend. We're just going to go into the training deal. And notice what you have are basically 4 documents. First of all is a training PowerPoint. I created it. I can't say that it's anything that a business would ever use. I created it based on a supposition that the railroad had records going way back to about the time they stopped shipping steer, which is somewhere around 20 years after Clark got hurt. Trucks kind of began to take over. Blah, blah, blah. But the railroad itself, the Missouri, Kansas, Texas, was basically built so you could go get the steer so that you could take the steer and sell the meat in New York City, Philadelphia, get it up to Chicago. St. Louis had a lot of slaughterhouses and it was ideal but they always shipped live steer because live steer slaughter better. And it keeps better, and they didn't have all the refrigeration. But by 1913, a lot of that's beginning to change. The ability to make ice and everything else has gotten a lot better. So I don't know all the details there, but we'll come back and look at this mock trial domestic animal prototype. And basically what that is they probably have a prototype of this PowerPoint, and then they modify each slide by the animal in question. Last week's lecture talked a little bit about the difference between a grizzly bear and a black bear. You make yourself big for one, and you play dead for the other. So we'll see how that plays out in this in just a second. But the other thing I want to show you, and this is something I'd like you to kind of spend some time in and take a little time to look at it, because remember, what we're doing in the mock trial is we are modernizing this case, and we're going to spend a lot of time in this case. I think it's a really good object lesson on transition from agrarian society into industrialized society, where we may go from, in an agrarian society, we all had to recognize that animals of any breed were dangerous. In an industrialized society, a lot of the defects are kind of latent. They're hidden. We don't understand the inner workings of machinery or anything else. So a couple things are going on inside this training. Well, a bunch of things are going on. And you'll notice what we've got is we've got something called the Monday toolbox. We click over here, a Friday toolbox. And this one, we jump to the end of the year, and it looks pretty much like they're always doing round table. Every Friday they go over rules and regulations, local, state, federal, railroad, interchange. So, they're going to have a topic every first Friday of every month. And notice that they only really work from 6th of March through end of November. And that's because the ground is too hard. Trackmen actually work in the ground. So the student who made this, and this was made by a brilliant master's student of mine who is now getting her PhD, fabulous work. She knew how to set one up and then make copies of it and then modify it quickly. So one of the things we're seeing over here is always this OH, Otto Hausmann, Otto Hausmann, Otto Hausmann. And then end of month or middle of month, the BMWE comes in. Well, that's the Brotherhood of Maintenance of Way Employees. So if you put BMWE or Brotherhood of Maintenance of Way Employees into a Google search, you should go right to this website. This is the union for the trackmen. Remember, the trackmen work top of rail out to edge of property. So they're used to that kind of loosey-goosey, rocky environment with a lot of up and down, if you will. So some of the other thing that's going on, we've got a Friday toolbox, a monthly training. So you can see, she really set this up well. It's really cool. That we're going to have these themes running throughout the month so that in the Friday toolbox, in the Monday toolbox, we may be addressing these. And this is a way for the foreman to know, hey, I got to train on this, and we're going to have a better chain of command. So rather than giving non-advice like, oh, be careful, don't get hurt, which is like your mom telling you, hey, go cross Skinker at 7 o'clock in the morning and don't get hurt. Oh, mom, your mom or your dad not going to tell you to do that. It's like, why don't you go play on the highway? Your parents, when they taught you how to cross the street, probably took you to a fairly non-busy intersection near your home and maybe practiced it multiple times, told you to look both ways, then look back again to where the cars nearest you are. And as you're walking, keep an eye both directions. And if you see a car, come to a stop unless you're in the path of that vehicle, blah, blah, blah. So whatever your parents told you, maybe run like heck if you see a car, which is good advice. All right, so we're seeing that Otto Hausmann has the lead here. One thing I like to tell students is I think it's smart for us to begin to have other workers, particularly in a labor force like this, become the teachers. Because one truism in education is you never learn anything so well as that which you teach. So, if we're sitting here looking at, we've got to be defensive as an organization. How are we going to? One of the ways we can do it is Clark got hurt on a subject he taught. He's the expert on this. You know, Ed's going to play pretty well in front of a jury. One more, you can train and train and train and train and train. Our object is to get this to be second nature, but we know it won't. We know it won't. In this particular case, the railroad's pretty likely to say, we've had 417 embankment descents following derailments or following need to get off the railway in relatively similar circumstances. That's in the 8 to 12 foot tall embankment range. We've only had 2 people get hurt. And this is the only case where all 3 workers did it wrong. And I think I talked to you about this last week. They should have turned into the slope, dug elbows and knees, and come to a stop. Get out of the zone of danger. So, we're kind of looking at when our quarters run here. I'm going to let you fish around in here, but you can see they've got to train on a lot of stuff. One of the big ones we're looking at here is contain and control procedures in the case of a derailment, car failure, all of a sudden a door comes open and boom, you've got cargo coming out of the door, all kinds of wild stuff. So wild and domestic animal. But if you look at all of what she did, she really, really showed, she knows kind of everything there is pretty much about the railroad. And, so if you're going to prosecute this case or defend it for the railroad or, try to get the railroad to look like they didn't care, you got things like self-preservation clause. We would rather have you survive as an employee than have you risk your life over property. The only exception to that is if you can reasonably stop the property from damaging other people without greatly risking your own life or your own well-being. We are not looking for Marine Corps heroes who are going to jump on the grenade. We want you to use good reason out in the field. But remember, we'd rather have you back to work tomorrow. You're very valuable to us. There's a reason we train you this heavily. There's a reason we pay you this well. There's a reason you keep getting hired back. We want you back. Let me make one more comment here. You'll notice this doesn't have a lead in it, but we've got, and that would usually, no, it does. Yeah, it's got Otto Hausman. All right, so the people we have are Jimmy George Hausman. What we do in this case is we take Jim and George Hausman and we mix them into one person, one brother. So we've got the father and the son. Then for the crew members, we have Pleasant W. Clark. That's his real name. It's not in the case, which kind of always stinks to me. They don't really want anyone to think this guy's a real human. He's just a Clark, This judge was bad, in my opinion. You may disagree with me. The next person is EJS, who stands for Earl J. Scruggs. Listen to the Beverly Hillbillies theme song, and Earl Scruggs plays, I think, the guitar on that, and Flat plays the banjo, or it's the other way around. Some great picking. And we'll talk about some other characters that I made up. The idea here is we're going to have 2 kind of non-Hausman employees who may or may not favor one another. Then the crew also has another guy, but he's not necessarily part of this particular event. He may be an extra that they hire on when they really ramp up in June, blah, blah, blah. He might be big. He may work 4 years in a row, and then he's got 3 years on the street. And they'll call him and say, hey, we can get you back to work. You interested? Depending on where he is in his life, he may be. All right. So that's enough on that Excel spreadsheet. Now, let's try to quickly, and I'm sorry this is going longer than I really wanted, but I do want to cover the domestic animal prototype training. This is what I think Otto Hausmann might have done. All right. And so let's see if it'll enable editing. I want to go to slideshow and I want to go from beginning. Okay. All right. So here's Missouri, Kansas, Texas logo, MKMT. I probably should have added some header notes and made it look a little more official. But basically, this is emergency procedures, domesticated cattle prototype. Okay, modifiable for specific breeds. So that's basically, this tells us this is a prototype. Domesticated cattle are different than wild cattle. Wild cattle are wild animals. We'd go back to our wild training there, although there may be something specific about these. Because from what I can understand, Texas steer, Longhorn steer are were kind of a native cattle bred to something that the Spanish brought over. And you'll see they've got slight differences in horns. But you really look at these animals, they actually seem kind of docile. Even this one, which is obviously a bull. And this one looks like it's a girl. And that's a cow, isn't it? A bull and a cow. You know, I would say one of the things we got to remember, guys, think about it. The most dangerous dog you know is probably the Pekingese. They'll come running at you and they'll bite you, or the dachshund. The dachshund goes down holes after the badger. You know, the badger is one of the most vicious animals in the wild world. Its cousin, the wolverine, is a little more vicious. That's why you have the Wisconsin badgers and the Michigan wolverines. The interesting thing, after a derailment, now, guys, I want to tell you, this is old stuff. This is stuff that the railroad learned darn near 100 years ago. So this is literature that they created, but periodically we've had to ship some steer on the railroad during trucking strikes or overloads or whatever, and we still keep these current. But one of the things you got to look at in a derailment, most of these things are going to be quiet, docile, easy to handle. This is basically a responsive and cooperative breed. They want to remain calm and quiet. They're eager to return to grazing. This is a basic herd animal. Herd animals, you know, it's kind of once you get one of them moving, they all tend to move. You know, and a shepherd's hook. Let me make a comment about Clark and his club he brought. That's routinely used in animal handling to kind of extend yourself, because you can't see it, but I've got a fence post kind of, or a stairway post over here that's about 4 feet to my hand. If I can get my hand and extend it there, I could maybe get an animal, because cattle don't see well, to see that as kind of, that's an impediment. I'm not going to try to go through that. I'm just keep walking through, because there's a through path into this gate. And we can use it to kind of tap them on the shoulder to get them going a little bit. Shepherds use a big, long shepherd hook. And basically all they have to do is get the bellwether sheep, which is a sheep that wears a little bell around it. They get it moving in a direction. The rest of the herd tends to follow, because oftentimes what they're doing is, I'm leading you out of this pasture over to another where you're going to get even better food, you know, blah, blah, blah. And the animals are, you know, they become pretty conditioned to this. And this is a herd animal deal. So any animals we find out there, and there are some sitting out there, guys, they should be quiet, docile, and easy to handle. And I'm going to come back to them because I want to make you aware that we may or may not come up against a single animal. So to me, these slides are a little out of order. I'm going to come backwards. If by any chance, when we do a count, we've got a total of 20 animals that should have been on that car. If It looks to me like 3 of them we're probably going to have to put down right here on the spot. They're just too bad hurt. But there may be another one that got out safe. One of the guys said he only saw 15, 16 animals out here in the field. So we're going to have to do a careful count. If we get a lone animal, as you might expect, it's kind of like a lone dog. When they're not with their pack, they're unpredictable. Now, dogs are a little different because of pack mentality. If one is aggressive and attacks you, the whole pack will come after you. But if you can convince that one that you're more powerful, the whole pack will run away from you. That doesn't really work with herd animals like cows because dogs are not really a herd animal. And I don't know what in the hell they're doing down in Lubbock with this animus revertendi. You know, I tell you what, we track foremen, we don't have a lot of Latin training. I think that's Latin. It doesn't look like Greek. There's some notes that I got with this that basically says a herd animal off by itself after a frightening condition will tend to return to its sort of animal instincts. It'll kind of forget that it's a herd animal. And one of the things we always see with wild animals, and remember, we've trained a lot about wild animals, guys, is that if they're frightened, if they're scared, if they're off their schedule a little bit, they tend to work in the sort of fight or flight. And we humans can cause them to fight, or we might cause them to run. So one of the things we got to look for, and if we find out we've got a lone animal, we're going to come back and we're going to review this again. But if they've got a head down, they're pawing, they're hoofing, they're snorting. If you observe this, play dead. Act like this thing's a grizzly. Even if you're up on a track or something like that, play dead. Better if you can get off the track and kind of get down to the side, because these things are they don't see real well. Out of sight, out of mind. You'd be safer. Now, the ones we got out in the field, we gotta figure out which one might be the leader. And you can kind of tell out there. Jimmy George has worked with enough cattle. We're going to kind of let him pick. But all you have to do generally is get one of them moving, and 2 of us can go out there, or 3, because it's better if we have another guy back over here too. But we'll put one guy on the top, one guy over here, one guy over on the right. So, we got 1 to port and or 2 to port, 1 to port forward, 1 to port aft. And one of the things you do is you kind of drive them forward, then you walk back, and then so you just kind of keep doing this box. And it sort of keeps them moving. As long as you're moving, they're moving. And you got to get a little ahead of them and then kind of come back. And it makes them feel comfortable because you're checking to see if stragglers are there. And so, one of the things we've got to do is we establish kind of a flight zone boundary. They won't necessarily go beyond this line between you guys. All right. The big deal we got to worry about here is all of this 300-degree vision. So on a clock face, something like 8 to 4. Do not cover its 6. Okay, you guys all know from Top Gun what that means. Don't get on the rear end of this animal. If you don't remember this, we talked a little bit about some horses. You go right up behind a horse, it's generally going to kick you real hard just to figure out what's there. And it's simply that they kick hard to teach a lesson hard. So this area over here, the black area, I'm sorry, my pointer's kind of gone away, tells us to get the animal started, we kind of want to be a little bit back of that point of balance shoulder and push them that edge. All right. We do not want to get behind this thing. It's pretty likely to either turn around and charge, or you may induce a flight. And if it starts running, it has a much higher likelihood of getting hurt, particularly up in our track area. So that's kind of it for right now, guys. Uh, go out and get the ones out in the field and then come back and give me a heads up. Now, I want to make one other point before I close this, and that is that they tried to put this PowerPoint on the engineer's laptop. Otto didn't have one. You know, they've actually got a pretty good internet system all across the railroad, and it works all the time, but there were no operating laptops due to the derailment. And so they put this on Jimmy George's phone, not even on an iPad. You know, it's all I've got a phone, but you know, something about that big, instead of even something about that big. So that's the end of this slide. As you're working through the case for this just the facts, ma'am, part of the case analysis, which is on Clark, which is due Sunday, February 11th, you know, kind of keep this in the back of your mind, because this is what we're trying to develop for, let's see, in the slideshow, boo, boo, boo. This is what we're trying to develop for the mock trial. And so we want to work through the facts back in 1897, and then we're going to explore the modern law. And I thank you very much for watching. And let me see if I can get out here and turn off my recorder. Where are you? There you are.